September 22nd, 2025. 3 African nations just walked away from the International Criminal Court. Not quietly. Not politely. They called it a neo-colonial tool and slammed the door. The global justice system just cracked wide open, and what's underneath is uglier than anyone wants to admit. Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger announced their immediate withdrawal from the ICC, branding it a neo-colonial imperialist tool. These aren't random accusations thrown around by frustrated leaders. These are military juntas who've seen the pattern, done the math, and realized they're playing a rigged game. Let me show you why they're right. Here's a number that should make your blood boil. Out of 54 individuals indicted by the ICC, 47 are African. That's 87%. 87% of all ICC indictments target one continent. Now tell me with a straight face this court represents international justice. Go ahead. I'll wait. But it gets worse. Much worse. Because while African leaders get dragged to The Hague for fighting rebels and defending their borders, Western war criminals sip champagne at book launches and collect speaking fees. George W. Bush invaded Iraq on fabricated evidence. Hundreds of thousands died. Tony Blair lied to Parliament about weapons of mass destruction. The Middle East is still burning from their decisions. Barack Obama authorized 542 drone strikes that killed thousands of civilians, including American citizens, without trial. The ICC's response to all of this? Crickets. Absolute silence. Let me tell you about the Afghanistan scandal, because this is where the hypocrisy becomes absolutely grotesque. In 2019, ICC prosecutor Fatou Bensouda tried to do her job. She wanted to investigate U.S. war crimes in Afghanistan. The evidence was overwhelming: systematic torture by the CIA, civilian massacres, drone strikes on hospitals and wedding parties. Thousands of documented victims. Real crimes. Real evidence. Real justice, right? Wrong. America's response was to sanction the prosecutor herself. They froze her assets, banned her from entering the United States, threatened her family. And here's the kicker: the ICC judges suddenly decided the investigation was not in the interests of justice and dropped it. When the new prosecutor tried again, he quietly deprioritized American crimes and focused only on Taliban fighters. Convenient, isn't it? As recently as August 2025, the United States sanctioned 4 individuals currently serving on the International Criminal Court. Not for corruption, not for misconduct, for doing their jobs, for trying to hold powerful nations accountable. The message is crystal clear: investigate Americans or their allies, and we will destroy you professionally, financially, and personally. The United States has a law literally called the Hague Invasion Act. It authorizes military force to free any American held by the ICC. Think about that for a second. The world's most powerful nation has a standing law that says they'll invade the Netherlands if international justice touches their citizens. But African leaders? They get arrest warrants issued faster than you can say double standard. In November 2024, ICC judges issued arrest warrants for Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and former Defense Minister Yoav Gallant for war crimes and crimes against humanity in Gaza. Finally, you might think, the ICC is holding a Western ally accountable. But watch what happened next. In February 2025, Trump issued an executive order imposing sanctions on the ICC. America didn't even wait for the trial. They just punished the court for daring to issue the warrant. Let's talk about the war crimes the ICC ignores while hunting African leaders. Bush and Blair killed over 200,000 civilians in Iraq based on lies. Obama's drone program turned weddings and funerals into mass graves. NATO bombed Libya into a failed state where open-air slave markets now operate. Coalition forces buried civilians alive in the rubble of Raqqa and Mosul. The documentation exists. The evidence is overwhelming. The witnesses are everywhere. The ICC's response? Not our jurisdiction. Insufficient evidence. Not in the interests of justice. But when an African president fights terrorism or deals with armed rebellion, the investigation starts immediately. The arrest warrants fly. The sanctions follow. The pattern is so obvious it's insulting. The military leaders of the 3 Sahel countries signed a joint statement on September 22, 2025, announcing their withdrawal during a period of turmoil in the Sahel region. These nations are fighting actual terrorism, real insurgencies, armed groups that massacre civilians. But instead of support, they get investigation threats. Instead of cooperation, they get lectures about human rights from countries that drone strike children and call it collateral damage. Putin gets an arrest warrant for moving Ukrainian children to safety during a war. Netanyahu gets a warrant for defending Israel, then America sanctions the court. But Bush, who created the Iraq disaster? Blair, who lied to start a war? Obama, who killed American citizens without trial? Sarkozy and Cameron, who destroyed Libya? They give speeches. They write memoirs. They live in mansions and collect awards. This isn't about being anti-justice. This is about demanding equal justice. If the court only prosecutes the powerless while protecting the powerful, it's not a court, it's a weapon. And Africa has finally figured out it's the target. Burundi already left the ICC years ago. South Africa threatened withdrawal multiple times. Kenya defied ICC summons and nothing happened because they had regional support. The African Union has repeatedly called for mass withdrawal. This isn't new. This is decades of frustration finally boiling over. The withdrawal marks a serious retreat from accountability and undermines decades of African leadership in the global fight against impunity, say the critics. But here's the question they won't answer. Accountability for whom? Because from where I'm standing, the ICC has been very accountable to Western interests. When America says jump, the court asks how high. When Africa asks for equal justice, the court issues another arrest warrant. The 3 Sahel nations didn't just wake up one morning and decide to leave. They watched the pattern. They saw how the court treated them versus how it treated the West. They did the math on 47 African indictments out of 54 total. They watched America sanction ICC judges for doing their jobs. They watched Netanyahu get a warrant, and Trump immediately sanctioned the entire court in response. They learned the lesson. International law applies to everyone except those powerful enough to ignore it. So when Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger call the ICC a tool of neo-colonial control, they're not being dramatic. They're not playing the victim. They're stating documented facts. They're pointing at a pattern so obvious that the only people who can't see it are the ones benefiting from it. The ICC wants credibility? Start prosecuting Western war criminals. Issue arrest warrants for Bush and Blair. Investigate Obama's drone program. Hold NATO accountable for Libya. Charge coalition commanders for Mosul and Raqqa. Treat American war crimes with the same urgency you treat African civil conflicts. Until then, don't act surprised when Africa walks away. Because here's the truth the establishment doesn't want you to understand. The International Criminal Court isn't failing. It's succeeding at exactly what it was designed to do. Keep the powerful safe while keeping the powerless in line. Project Western dominance while calling it international justice. Preserve the colonial hierarchy while wearing a judge's robe. 3 African nations just called that bluff. They saw the game. They understood the rules. And they chose to stop playing. The question isn't whether they were right to leave. The question is why it took so long. The question is how many more will follow. The question is whether international justice can survive when the only people it prosecutes are those who can't fight back. September 22, 2025 might be remembered as the day the mask finally slipped. The day the pretense of equal justice became impossible to maintain. The day Africa said enough. And honestly, it was long overdue. The game has changed. The question is, will the ICC,